Going live, and I'm live. Good afternoon. Welcome to Frankenstein Tea, a daily short story program for adult listeners. I am Kristen. I'm the director of the Island Free Library on Block Island. I am in the Island Free Library on Block Island right now. It is the weather report from Block Island. I don't know what it's doing. I don't know if it's raining. It's been raining. It's been drizzling. Hi, Dad. My dad just logged on. It hasn't been hard pouring down rain, but it's been raining. It's nice. It's really greening Block Island up. It's very lovely to see Block Island green again. It was a long, dry, brown, dusty summer. That's my impression. Brown, dusty summer. That sounds like a short story, right? Block Island. The summer was long, brown, and dusty. But it's greening up, and I don't know if the sun will come out today. It doesn't seem like that. But so it's gray and drizzly and not particularly warm, not cold either, but, you know, a good day for a short story. So, Dad, what's it like down there for you? Maybe sunny. Hopefully sunny. You're usually a day. We're usually a day behind you, so that would be good if you had sun. We'd have sun tomorrow. Frankenstein Tea is a short story program. It was a way for us to continue to stay connected during shelter in place, and carries forward with that goal. To stay connected. And I don't think any libraries are doing in-person programming yet. I heard recently from our youth services librarian that one of the libraries is starting to think about some children's story time where she said, what did she explain to me? They're like placing, like pool noodles, to space things out, to give families their room, dividing up like the parking lot with pool noodles so families could come to live story hour. Needless to say, I'm not sure that anybody's doing programming in person yet, so we carry forward with this virtual program, and we're happy that you can join us and that you enjoy short stories. My father has just reported that it's partly cloudy and 85. All right, we are definitely not like partly cloudy. We're cloudy. So partly cloudy for tomorrow might be good. So this is a virtual program that was started in March and carries forward today, a way for us to stay connected to you, our patrons, our family and friends, and for you to stay connected to us here at the library. We do that through literature in this program, through story, through the written word, and it is always for adult listeners. This is an adult program. We have other programs for kids and grandkids. If you need to know what we're doing, give us a call or check our website or see what's going on. I'm going to read something today from a new book that I bought for the library, but of course I bought it with this program in mind. Black American Short Stories, A Century of the Best, edited by John Henrik Clark. It was published by Hill and Wang, a division of Farrar, Straus and Giroux in New York. And it was, So A Century of the Best, but it was published in 1966, 1993. 1993. I'm not sure why the original copyright is 1966, but I never really understand copyright. I mean, I do, but I just have to read it more intently than here just glancing at it. So anyway, this is a new book to us, Black American Short Stories, A Century of the Best. I am reading today on page 394 here. I read a few of these today. Do I say that every day? I read a few stories today and picked this one. Probably true most days. I read a few stories today and picked this one. I liked a few stories in here today, But I thought this one maybe could build on a theme that we've been working on this week. We'll see. We'll see how you feel about it. We'll see if you think there's even the slightest thread that we could piece together the stories of Monday day and now today, Wednesday, September 2nd, 2020. This story is called Jessie by Rosemarie Robotham. And I don't have tea, but I have water. I'm going to have a sip. Okay. Jessie by Rosemarie Robotham. Hold on one second. I'm so sorry, but I just realized somebody was, another staff person held a Zoom book club on my computer, and so the volume was on, and you don't want to hear any noises my computer makes while I read. So here we go. Third time's a charm. Jessie, Rosemarie Robotham. On the first day of school, we numbered 30 in our class and sat in 5 rows, 6 girls deep. Our navy blue linen uniforms, brand new, rustled with too much starch, tickled our legs, and made long pyramids in our seated laps. Soon the stiffness would give, the cloth would grow limp and familiar, no longer ironed in the careful manner of the first few days when our mothers, admonishing us that we were young ladies now, scrutinized us on our way through the doors to our grown-up world of high school. Only Jessie in our class had no mother. Her uniform was crushed and dingy with wear. The top button of her blouse was missing, and Jessie kept tugging the break of her collar together. The sleeves barely curved over her thin shoulders, and the edges trailed tiny threads that had come undone from the fine weave. Jessie lived at the orphanage up the street. She had inherited her uniform. She owned only one, from another girl who lived there, who was several classes ahead of her and too filled out for the tunic. Most of our class had arrived from junior school together. Jessie had come from another school. She was small for her 12 years and would collapse into uncontrollable spasms of nervous laughter whenever the teacher asked her a question. In later weeks, this annoyed Miss Abbott, who thought Jessie was trying to avoid studying. But Jessie literally could not find her voice when the eyes of the class were upon her. Of all of my schoolmates the first day, Jessie most fascinated me. She sat alone at her desk, shoulders hunched and head bent. Huddled like that in her secondhand clothes, she looked poor and motherless, which intrigued and stirred me. How foolish Jessie thought me when, months into our friendship, I confessed that I found real romance in her living in a long wooden barrack with other children, constant playmates, and no parents whose hearts she might break at every turn. I was from a large and established family in Jamaica. Our relatives turned up everywhere. Most were handsome, coffee-skinned, sharp-eyed, erect, and they had clothed themselves in the mantle of being special, with no thought whatsoever that they could be otherwise. Oh, we had our drunks, our problem children, the cousin who stole his father's Pontiac and was that night roughly arrested, the uncle who could not be left alone with the nieces, the tender adolescent who wandered into the bush to smoke weed. But our family took these characters as necessary elements in an invigorating mix, colorful souls to be scolded and protected by those among us who were more firmly rooted. I felt the turbulence of my family's loyalty and the weight of their pride. I always felt like an imposter in their midst, the lonely, hidden child who had learned to smile and speak the appropriate words. By comparison, Jessie's life at the convent house seemed free of such shackles. All those orphans to share her days, vegetable patches to tend, sheets to be laundered, nuns and sisters to confound. I had no apprehension then of the orphan's sense of having no place, no corner of one's own. It would be years before the knowledge dawned what I really shared with Jessie on that very first day was the awareness of not belonging. And I envied not her imagined exemption from the strictures of love, but her freedom to admit and embrace her rootlessness, to freely explore that emptiness and loss. Jessie's desk was on the other side of the classroom, next to the window. She was always studying her hands, which she kept crossed on her lap. She never sprawled across the pencil carved desk like the other girls, never rested on the delicate points of her elbows, or placed an inquisitive chin in her palms. Instead, she seemed to curl closer into her silent self, waiting to disappear. I stared at Jessie for days across the classroom. Sometimes she raised her eyes and caught me watching her. She'd look away immediately, back down at her hands. But soon she would look to my side of the classroom again to see if I was still watching her. I always was. One morning in literature class, I smiled tentatively when Jessie looked up. She smiled back, a small twitch at the corners of her lips, enough for me to be sure. She didn't look my way again all morning, and I spent the next periods watching her wayward, tumbling hair. At break, I went over to her desk. Want to get lunch together? I asked, her shyness infecting me. I don't get lunch, she mumbled. I realized I had never seen her in the tuck shop at break time. She was never among the girls who sat with their patties, sodas, and potato chips under the poinsettia trees. I thought that she must not have the money. What do you do? I asked. She shrugged. Walk around, she said. I go over by the fence. Excitement flushed through me. None of the girls had ever dared approach the fence, overgrown with vines, hidden by spreading bougainvillea, the grass high and as sharp as a fist-formed girl. Only Jessie had ventured there, risking her very life for a glimpse of Mad Martha. It was said that Mad Martha was 100 years old. She lived in the turreted, peaked shingle house across the barbed wire fence. No one I knew had ever seen Mad Martha, but tales of her evil abounded. It was said she had murdered her children, two small daughters, when inspectors from child welfare came to take them away. Some versions of the tale had her killing the inspectors as well, and a police officer or two who had been sent to investigate. Mad Martha had buried them all in her yard, and now she took meals with the ghosts of her children, danced lewdly with the men, and sang deep, wailing hymns rich with madness and pain when darkness crept in through the trees. The teachers, even as they scoffed at the stories, had cautioned us never to go there. I thought Jessie very brave on this count, too. She risked not just the sorcery of Mad Martha, but the rod of a disobeyed headmistress. Have you seen her? I asked Jessie in awe. The girls had all filed out of the classroom, and we were alone. Jessie shook her head. Can I go with you? Today? Jessie asked. I nodded. Okay, she said. We went down the stairs the back way so that the teachers wouldn't see us and scooted across the playing field behind the netball courts, climbed over the enormous crawling trunk of a plum tree, and were at the fence. Mad Martha's yard was parched dirt shaded by leafy trees. Old tires and wire littered the side of the house. All the windows were shuttered and dark. A few feet from the back door, thick acacia bushes marked the spot where the bodies were buried. I shivered in the heat. Soft hairs rose along my arms and stood stiff at the nape of my neck. Jessie crouched calmly beside me, her face serene. I thought how beautiful she was, with her wild hair and threadbare clothes, her brilliant black eyes. We stood looking into Mad Martha's yard for a long time. The wind waved the dry acacia branches, stirred up dust in the yard. Nothing else moved. Jessie seemed content to just stand there, watching for Mad Martha, the lunch hour ticking by. I grew bored. I looked down at my watch. The tuck shop would close in 10 minutes. Let's get lunch, I suggested. Jessie did not look at me. You go, she said tightly. I've enough money for both of us, I offered. She looked at me briefly then, her brows creased and anxious, before looking down at her scuffed shoes. Would that be all right? She asked. That night I told my father about Jessie, and from then on he would count out an extra $50 so that my little friend need not go hungry. Jessie remained sheepish about accepting the rice cake and the chocolate milk she favored for lunch. It was a difficult moment that we learned to live through each day. We became inseparable, Jessie and I. I was fat and she was beautiful. I was hampered and she was free. Jessie saw it differently. I belonged and she stood outside. But in truth, I had never felt more at home anywhere than with Jessie. And so, to be with her, I happily stepped outside the circle she had drawn around me and the rest of our classmates. I began to skip the break time gatherings outside the tuck shop in favor of eating lunch down by the fence. Jessie and I could talk more freely there, or just sit quietly, lost in mutual exile, watching Mad Martha's abandoned yard. In fact, Jessie was no orphan. She had been put into the orphanage by her spinster aunts, her father's three sisters, whom she could not recall meeting when she was 3. Her mother had suffered what in those days was delicately referred to as a mental collapse. But it was 3 years before Jessie told me this. I knew by then that she had a father, an East Indian accountant who lived with her younger sister in a bungalow next to the university. She had never explained how it was that her sister escaped the convent home, and some instinct had cautioned me never to pry. I remember the afternoon Jessie first told me about her mother. We were sitting in the geography room, which that year was our homeroom. The classroom was shadowy because the hurricane louvers were wound almost shut. We should not have been there. The headmistress had decreed that all who could not leave the premises at 2 o'clock, when school let out, must sit in the detention room doing homework, supervised by the teacher on duty. Jessie and I loved to play cat and mouse with the patrolling teacher. We hid under classroom windows, skirted corners just as the teacher rounded them, flew downstairs with fugitive grace so as not to be discovered. When the teacher was satisfied that all girls still on the school premises had been rounded up, Jessie and I would creep to the geography room, which was at the back of the campus and particularly lonely at that hour. We'd shut the door, let the barest crack of light in through the louvers, sit on the desks, and talk. For hours every afternoon, we talked. When 5:30 arrived, we'd scramble home in our separate directions, amazed at how swiftly time passed. To push back the hour we were expected home, Jessie and I lied. I lied to my parents and she to the nuns that extracurricular activities claimed us after school. The first year, it was the camera club. The second, tennis practice. That year, our third, we were bogus members of the track team and irregular attendees of drama club. Jessie opened up about her mother toward the end of that year. It was a Tuesday, I remember. The track team was holding practice on the hockey field, and we were in the geography room as usual. We had been there 2 hours. Our conversation darted about, skipping from a boy in drama club who both of us liked to our chemistry teacher with whom I was infatuated. Mrs. Camperdown had a perfect life, I thought. A big, handsome bear of a husband, two gorgeous children, a sophisticated style. I admired the neatness of her family's lives, but I aspired to something quite different. I wanted to be an artist, to paint huge canvases of life observed on street corners. I babbled on about my dream of becoming a starving artist in an unheated loft, wind howling through the air shaft, windows frosted with the cold. Jessie pointed out that the picture didn't fit with our tropical island paradise. I would have to move north, we agreed, to a city of winters and tall stone buildings damp with rain. In a moment of sudden clarity, I understood the bittersweet ache I felt when I contemplated Mrs. Camperdown. It was because I would never be like her, and I knew right then that I would be a disappointment to my parents. I started to explain this to Jessie, but she cut me off. I wish my mother were around to care whether I disappoint her, she said moodily. Where is your mother, Jessie? It was the opening I had longed for. They took her to the madhouse, Jessie said bluntly. My father's sisters put her there. But now she's gone from there. I went there looking for her the summer before high school. No one would tell me where she went. Jessie watched her legs swing back and forth under the teacher's table on which she sat. I sat perfectly still. I've never seen her, Jessie said after a while, not since the morning they took her when I was 3. The men in white coats came and they took her away in a van. No joke, they really did wear white coats. My mother fought them like a tiger. She ripped one of the coats, got loose, and ran into the street. I can still see them chasing her, puffing and panting, and her cutting back, changing course. She almost got away. I was watching from the porch with my sister, Francine. We were both crying and holding on to each other, and I wished so mightily that my mom would get free. But they caught her and pushed her into the van. You could hear her screaming all the way up the street. Oh, Jess, how awful. Jessie kept watching her swinging feet. Why did they take her? I asked at length. Jessie didn't speak for a long time, and I waited with her. Finally, she whispered, My father said she had to go. She couldn't take care of us anymore. He said she wanted to hurt us. That was how her madness showed itself. It dawned on me that Jessie, even now, did not know the full story, but she told me what she could. My mother was a dancer when she met my father, Jessie said. Then she got pregnant with me and she couldn't dance anymore. So she married my father. Sister Margaret, who ran the orphanage, had told Jessie this. My father is strange, Jessie went on. He's silent and petty, and his sisters rule him. I don't remember them, but Sister Margaret told me they brought me there. Sister Margaret had told her a good deal more. She had told her how, after her mother left, Jessie had run screaming into the street, tearing off her clothes, beating her fists on the ground till her hands were torn and bloodied. That night, while her father slept, Jessie had climbed on top of him with a knife. He woke up just in time, but to this day he is sure I would have stabbed him right through the heart, Jessie whispered. The next day, my father's sisters took me to the orphanage. I cried for my mother for months. I sat by the front door waiting for her, but only my father came. He never brought Francine. I know Francine must have missed our mother as much as I did, but she was just a baby. They didn't let me see Francine again till I was 11, and she was 9. By then, she didn't remember our mother. She didn't remember the day they took her. She was a bad woman, my sister said. My father had told her that. Jessie began to cry softly because she couldn't recall her mother any better than Francine. But she had turned to her imagination and had painstakingly brushed in a detailed mythology from the dimmest trails of memory. She selected one of her memories now, the first of many she would share with me over the years. My mother would sing to us, Francine and me, Jessie said, her voice already steadier. She'd sing while she dressed our hair in ribbons. Then she'd take us for long walks in Hope Gardens, where we'd throw breadcrumbs to the swans and ride the carousel and have picnics in the shade of flaming trees. The grass would be a carpet of red from the fallen blossoms. A carpet for my princess daughters, my mother used to say. We'd spread our legs in the blossoms, and they'd crush a little and grow damp and cool underneath us. Jessie's face, still wet with tears, was luminous. Watching her, I could hardly speak, and I trembled at the force of her fantasy. The moment Jessie noticed my unease, she jumped up and reached for my hands, pulling me to my feet. It's late, she said. Your mom will be angry. You have to get home. Jessie, oh, Jessie, I said as she circled me with her thin arms and turned me toward the door. Tomorrow afternoon, she said, her lips close to my ear. We have drama club. Don't forget to tell your folks. That afternoon, as we were leaving the school grounds by the back way, strolling hand in hand along the hedge-lined path that led to the road, we glimpsed Mad Martha. We both saw her at the same moment, a ghostly figure, small and calcified, with thick, matted gray hair. We froze, straining to see her through the high, patchy edge. She seemed to float across the yard, her feet hardly touching the ground, her movements too fluent for a creature so haggard and old. She wore a faded print dress, loose and fluttering, like a fairy garment in the late afternoon breeze. We crept closer to the hedge. Mad Martha was standing over a garden pipe, catching water in a tin can. The overflow muddied the dirt, which caked on her bare feet. Mad Martha turned off the faucet and drifted toward the back door. She turned and stared straight at us before going in, her tawny eyes glinting like glass beads in the light, her cracked lips bared across the tobacco-brown nubs of her teeth. I shrank a full step back in terror, but Jessie did not move. Mad Martha, she said, Mad Martha, it's me. I was stunned. Jessie seemed to know the old woman who, even now, I could not believe had not been an apparition. We saw her, Jessie breathed. We finally saw her. Do you know her? I asked, squinting at Jessie, who had so many secrets still buried within. I don't know, she answered. My mother's name was Martha. I don't know where she is. Belatedly, I understood Jessie's obsession with the madwoman next door to our school. The madness and the name had seemed more than mere coincidence. The possibilities, however remote, too great to ignore. She's too old to be your mother. She has my coloring, Jessie insisted. She's brown-skinned and tiny like me. Too old, I said again as we turned back down the path. She's 90, at least. But we both knew Mad Martha was younger than she looked. She had moved with such incongruous and queenly grace. That was Jessie by Rosemary Robotham from a new collection of short stories on the library shelf, new to our library collection, Black American Short Stories, A Century of the Best, edited by John Henrik Clark. Don't think I know when that story was published, although let me just stick with me for 1 second. Let me see what it says. All right, what was her name? Rosemary Robotham was born in 1957 in St. Andrews, Jamaica. She attended grade and high school in Jamaica, then moved to New York to attend college. She graduated magna cum laude from Barnard College with a BA in literature and a minor in geography. She earned her MSJ from Columbia University's Graduate School of Journalism and worked for Life magazine as a reporter for 8 years. She also had freelance assignments for Essence and Omni magazines while publishing short stories and writing a novel. She is the senior editor for Gusha, the map and atlas division of Simon & Schuster, Inc., and continues to moonlight as a freelance writer and editor. I'm not sure if that tells us when that story was published, but she was born in 1957, and when this book was published, she was still alive. Oh, wait, hold on. What was the name of that? Oh, Jessie. Hold on. Wait, this does say when they were published. Jessie was first published in Essence magazine in September 1990, copyright 1990 by Rosemary Robotham, reprinted by permission of the author. So 1990. That story was published. Okay, that is today's episode of Frankenstein Tea. Thanks so much for coming. Everyone stay well, mask up, wash your hands, keep your social distance, eat right, sleep right, breathe deep, and I'll see you tomorrow here at 3 o'clock for another short story. Thanks again. Bye. Peace. Bye, Dad.